cool. I saw the commissioner, Brett Yormark, in the hallway at the game. He said he loves what we're doing on Inside the 12 and with the Big 12. I reminded him that I worked in the NBA and that I was with the Sixers when he was with, I'm with the Sixers as like a PR guy, but he was with the Nets. I was like, Commissioner, you took the Nets from Jersey to Brooklyn. I was like, and you're doing it again with the league. I was like, damn, did I just say that? That was a great line. And he was like, thank you very much. And it was perfect. I got to do the George Costanza because we were both going separate ways. So that was the end of our interaction. I was like, man, that went well. So I could talk about the game forever, but that's not why I got on here. Today I was not supposed to do a show. We were supposed to do a best of. And I just had to pop on to give my thoughts about Micah. And I'm giving you my thoughts because I'm giving you something you probably won't get anywhere else this morning. And it's I think, a smart opinion about the Cowboys and a very simplistic reason as to why they have struggled over the past 30-some years to achieve the kind of success that became familiar with Cowboys fans in the late 90s, or should I say early 90s, and that the one that we're enjoying reliving, right, on the Netflix documentary. Since the departure of Jimmy Johnson, and when Jimmy Johnson was with the Cowboys, there was a way to go about business, right? There was hang on one second, I'll make sure. Something's up with our internet. Okay, so Zach got kicked off of StreamYard, our producer, but that's fine for now because we're rolling, right? We don't need much around here, although we do need Zach at some point. So, the Cowboys were process-oriented with Jimmy Johnson. There was a clear, intentional blueprint there, right? The idea was to kind of distill his coaching philosophy into like a powerful formula, right? It was attitude, effort, performance, right? And the concept was, you saw it in the documentary, let the mind control the body, not the body controlling the mind. So like it was psychological on the field. That was Jimmy Johnson's process. Now, off of it, the systematic team building and the strategy, that was one of the most valuable trades in the history to get Herschel Walker for those 5, which would eventually turn into draft picks. The only pick that they held on to was Isaac Holt, or the only Viking they held on to was Isaac Holt. Everybody else they turned into draft picks. And again, they had speed at just about every position. And that was Jimmy's philosophy, right? A part of the philosophy. But there was a blueprint, right? There was a blueprint for the Patriots under Bill Belichick, the do your job process, okay? Everybody knows what that was, right? And the process was so, Bill Belichick was so focused on it. If you go back into the history books, like you're willing to be an unpopular person, right? If you're going to be so process driven because parts of the process are difficult, right? And, the Cowboys experienced a healthy version of that in 1989 when they went 1-15, right? That was part of Jimmy's process, okay? Now it is an unhealthy, toxic process. That isn't even a process. Like it's not a process. Like the San Antonio Spurs, that's another example of an organization that had a process. The Spurs, as far as I can remember, because that's back when I used to work in the NBA, I'm pretty sure they developed the trust the process mentality. I'm almost positive. I think that was there. I wrote a couple other ones down here. Amazon, right? They have a process. A company like Toyota, there's a process there. The reason the Cowboys have been mired in this dismal situation for so very long is because there is no process. I'll give you an example, okay? Now, there's very few things I know in life, right? But I know about sports for the most part because it's been my whole life. I've been involved on so many different levels. and I've had access on so many different levels. I know about getting messed up, taking drugs, drinking, from, the disease I still have today, but definitely 30 years ago, to the next 15 years, from 15 to 30, or 16 to 31, whatever. I was in the throes of that, right? Addiction. I never wanted to do what it would take to get sober, which really was, you have to be willing to go to any lengths. You have to be willing to go through the process. And the process is hard. For me, that process was I had to go to rehab for 30 days, right? You're like, oh my God, I can't go to rehab for 30 days. I got so much going on, or I have to get my affairs in order before I go to treatment. It's like, dude, you got something going on with you where you might die. By the way, for me, I didn't have anything going on outside of that because I was like a low bottom person. So they're like, you got to go to rehab. After rehab, you got to go to a recovery house. After a recovery house, you got to go to meetings every day. You got to live with another sober guy. It was 18 months of my life where I was embedded in recovery. Now I still am very involved in recovery, but early on, my process was nothing but sobriety, right? And it turned out to be a successful process. Now I still battle this thing every day, and when I say battle, I mean, there's certain things I do for my spiritual maintenance and ultimately to keep all that stuff, in the light as to what it really is. Because a lot of the drinking and drug usage, all that stuff, I think is a mindset thing. I always call it a mind F. You think you need it, but you really don't need it. But once you start to take it or absorb it, you have something in your mind, if you're an alcoholic or an addict, that really responds, right? The American Medical Association defines addiction as a disease. So that's enough for me, right? And I got off the debate squad. I told myself, I have this thing. I'm going to throw myself into recovery and do what people tell me. That was a process. It worked. Probably one of the only processes I ever actually was involved in and threw myself into and was willing to deal with because I had nowhere else to go. The broadcast business. I wanted it so bad. Okay, so bad after I got to rehab. I lived in Springfield, Massachusetts, lived in a Red Roof Inn by myself. I didn't know anybody. I was calling D-League games. After that, I lived on a friend's house. I lived on a friend's couch. This is when I'm sober, to go back home and work for the Charlotte Hornets and make $50 a game, doing some radio for them and an internet show, right? And then after that, I went to Monroe, Louisiana, and then to Waco. And then the opportunities would build, right? ESPN. I just signed a contract yesterday with NBC Sports. How about that? That's good news. To do basketball with them. We'll still do obviously college basketball and college football and college, whatever else for ESPN because that's my contract. But there's a ton of stuff going on. Work with the Big 12 now. That didn't people. By the way, if you watch last night's game, I think I did a great job, but I'm not a finished product. So it's there's no finished product, but you don't look at the top and be like, oh, okay, well, that's how you do it. Jerry Jones is like a drug addict that can't get sober. And here's what I mean by that, okay? I'm not saying he's a drug addict or an alcoholic, but a lot of times you don't want to do what you have to do to get where you need to get. So you don't want to do the hard stuff. You don't want to, hit the bottom, develop really enough draft picks, right? Or enough, whatever you need to do, suck bad enough for long enough, or have a philosophy to get rid of these assets to get those. There's nothing that Jerry's doing that is other than a quick fix. He's always looking for a quick fix. And if you're looking for a quick fix, you come up with bubkiss, dude. You get nothing. Okay? Really. Quick fixes in life, trying to get shortcuts, will get you where Jerry Jones was yesterday at a podium next to his son, trying to make sense out of trading Micah Parsons for an all-pro and 2 first-round draft picks. The deal in itself isn't that bad, truthfully. I mean, if you look at it on paper, I get it. I get the fact that I'm not a football savant. I got a buddy who I went to Richmond with, Joe Douglas, right? He was the general manager of the New York Jets. Joe Douglas is a very shrewd NFL front office guy. By the way, Joe was climbing the ranks of personnel departments for 20, 30 years, right? And my point is, Joe's the expert on that. I'm not. But I do know that, like, deals like this, here's what I know. I know that I don't know, right? Like I'm not in the room with Jerry Jones. Will McClay is a guy we don't talk about enough with this stuff. And Stephen Jones and the rest of the decision makers with the Cowboys. Like, I'm sure there is a method as to why they did that trade in the moment. Unfortunately, I don't think it's connected to any wholesale philosophy. So, like, it's just all up there. And if you don't have a process, right, then you're never going to sustain success. It's like with Houston this week, Willie Fritz, right? I mean, he's not Bear Bryant, but he's a freaking awesome football coach. And he's won everywhere he's gone. His last 2 years at Tulane, he was 24-4 and finished with a Sugar Bowl win over USC. Okay? He's in his second year at Houston. They're 1-0. Clearly things are headed in the right direction. Like, he is, I'm telling you, being able to go over to Houston's facility this week to talk to Willie Fritz, the guy has a process for everything. Literally, one of his assistant coaches was telling us, when we get set for pregame meal, we've got a process. Like, certain people line up over there, certain people line up over there, certain people line up over there. And, like, it's simple. People don't really have to think about it. It removes all kinds of guessing and bullshit, right? All the Cowboys are bullshit. And I love it because I respect Jerry Jones. I talk about it all the time. I got into an argument with Christy about it this weekend. Like, I just have an affinity for Jerry Jones. I don't know why. I feel like he's a great guy. I think he's got balls the size of church bells. I think he's a trailblazer. I just think there's so much amazing stuff about the dude that you just have to respect him. But he's got no process, dude. And I think, like, that's the issue. And the media in Dallas has talked about this for a while, but, like, there's no accountability for the general manager of the Dallas Cowboys. And that's how you end up in situations like this. So this conversation, like, anybody else, can tell you more about this exact trade and what's going on in the moment right now with the Dallas Cowboys, right? Anybody who's covering the team or has relationships on the inside. I have really good relationships with people who have relationships on the inside. I do not have relationships on the inside of the Cowboys, right? But I've been on the planet long enough to know a horseshit process when I see one. And that is what we're seeing here with the Cowboys. And it's unfortunate because the Cowboys seem to lack the grit, right? Like, the organization, as shiny and with all the bells and whistles as we have, they lack the grit, right, to be what it takes to become a champion again.